Hi lovelies, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it's your first time here. It's good to see you either way. Now, if you've been here before, then you are most likely well aware of my love of all things miniature. What you might not know though, is that I am an artiste and a professional nonetheless. I've sold a few paintings. Anyway, I tell you that not to flex, but to segue into what I'm doing in this week's video, which, I mean, if you've seen the thumbnail and read the title, you already know. I'm making a painting. And that's why I'm making a painting. Because I don't just like miniatures, I like all things artistic and creative, and painting is one of those many things that I enjoy. Now, this particular project very much excites me. This is something that I have been itching to do for quite a while. And I even have some ideas that I've been playing around with. I came up with some idea sketches. So basically what I'm going to do is a house in front of a seasonal landscape. I haven't quite decided on the season yet, although I'm pretty sure it's going to be autumn. So my choices were either autumn, winter, or spring because I want cozy. I want a fireplace with some smoke, and that's easy to achieve with autumn or winter. It's also, that would work with, an early spring. There's just some blossoms. It's rainy. It's warming, but it's still cool. You can get away with that. A fire in the summer, I mean, we do that with campfires, but even that's kind of excessive because it's already hot. Why do you want to be hotter? I digress. So these are the 3 seasons that I was contemplating when this idea first. And there's a reason that I want to go cozy. There's a reason that I want to have a house with a seasonal background. I have an inspiration that kicked this off, but I don't want to tell you what that is yet because that will spoil the whole plan. And I don't feel like divulging that just yet. So that's going to come later. But for now, we're going with house in front of a seasonal background. And there's another little angle to this because the way I want to do it isn't just a painting. It's not just paint on canvas. I want to paint with fabric. Kind of like this. This is one of my fabric paintings. I started making these years ago and I love them. It's a great way of using up scraps. It's a fun way of playing with larger shapes and sizes and textures and color. You can do a little bit of painting, like I've got some painting here, or you can just rely on the fabric to be your color and your, texture and interest. I love that there's so much that you can do to play with these. So this is what I want to do, not like this exactly, but this is the style of painting that I want to do for this particular project. And yeah, I seriously think I'm going to end up going with autumn. But we'll see. To the studio!
I started this project by sketching out the design that I had planned on my canvas. This ended up being a completely useless step because once I start painting with the fabric, you can't see through fabric the way you can through paint. So totally covered up my lines and I couldn't see what I had drawn anyway. But whatever. I guess this helped me get a feel for where things were going to go and how I was going to divide up the canvas. So I guess it kind of helped in the long run. I'm just going to go with that anyway. Now I'm picking out my fabric. I have a whole collection of scraps and offcuts and leftovers that I keep specifically for paintings. Different colors and patterns. Nothing that's too busy, because I want everything to be able to layer and coordinate nicely. And what I've decided to go with for the background is this beautiful, like, navy colored background with like I think they're like cream colored stars. They're not quite white, not quite yellow. So yeah, like cream colored. Anyway, I really like the idea of like a starry night sky, because I want this to have like a cozy autumn vibe, is what I'm going for. We're like fully into spring now, but I don't care. I want the cozy autumn vibes. I like the dark half of the year much better than the light half of the year. So that's, yeah. I'm using just a matte Mod Podge. I like that better. It's a little bit thinner than tacky glue, so it's easier to spread and work. So you can like spread the fabric out nice and thin, and you can kind of like smear it with your fingers like I was doing there, to get like a nice smooth layer of fabric. So I like the Mod Podge. That's my favorite like glue material for sticking fabric to canvas. It's what I personally like anyway. And that's why I have the large jug, because making these fabric paintings, you go through a lot of Mod Podge, because you have to glue down everything. You have to make sure it's like really nicely stuck. I want it to, lay flush when it's against the wall, and I don't want anything to pull off or add any extra bulk, so that you can't hang it when it's done. So when I get to the edges and the corners and stuff, I just glue the fabric all the way around the canvas. As much fabric as I have, I just stick it all down, and then I fold the corners kind of like wrapping paper. You can kind of see what I'm doing there. I just kind of fold up, the sides, and then I fold in the corners and then wrap down the top. You can fold everything towards the top and the bottom, or towards the sides, sort of however the fabric works for you. It's basically like wrapping a present, if you think of it that way. And that's the sky. And then you just leave it to dry. And the way that I make these is, so you start from the top and you work down, and then you start from the back and layer everything in front, which I think is kind of obvious, but if you've never done it before, maybe it's not. I've been making these since 2016, I think, was the first fabric painting I ever made. And I really like it. You can see the tree off to the, what's that, the left-hand side of the screen? That's another fabric painting, one of the ones that I made back in 2016. I really like these. It's a great way of making, so I don't know, I was going to say it's kind of a quick way of making art, because you just like slap down a piece of fabric and you can cover a large surface a lot quicker than actual like painting. But then you still have to wait for dry time, and it can take longer for the glue to dry than it can for paint. So is it actually faster? Maybe not. Anyway, what I decided I wanted to do with the background here is give it kind of like a end of sunset look. So there's just like a hint of color at the skyline. And rather than layering more fabric, I thought I would go in with paint. And so I put in like a reddish orange. I mixed a little bit of red and a little bit of orange, and put a little bit of a layer of that sort of at the horizon line. And then I went in with a purple. I mixed some purple in with that, what was left of the reddish orange. And I blended that above the orange into the orange and into the blue. And then I went in with some navy blue just again to blend the purple into the blue of the fabric a little bit better. And yeah, on screen, that looks gorgeous. Not so much in person. It it was not looking as good in person, but I was trying to trust the process. So I kept going. Just trust the process. So now I'm picking what I want for the first layer of ground because I want to do like hills, rolling hills of like farmland because that's what I'm going for, like a autumn farm, rural setting kind of thing. And at first I was thinking of going with yellow because usually what you want to do to give your picture depth, whether you're using fabric or paint or whatever medium, you want to go with your lighter colors at the back, and then things get darker as they come into the foreground. So that's why I was thinking of going with yellow, but I decided no, it wasn't the vibe I was going. That was like too much like a sand hill as opposed to um, like a harvested field. So I ended up going with this really light, kind of like a lime green. And I actually, because it was a little bit too like neon, I ended up gluing the fabric backwards. So it was the wrong side of the fabric to give it a little bit more of a muted look. And I really liked that. Now, I didn't cover that whole line of green, partly because I didn't have enough, and partly because I didn't really need to. So if you're going to cover up a space anyway, then you don't need to worry about like, you don't have to necessarily put down a whole piece of fabric if you're just going to cover it anyway. I'm going to use this orange, which, as much as I love the easel, it's kind of difficult for fabric paintings. I am used to making those on like a flat surface because that's what I used to do because I didn't have an easel back then. So I've had to sort of go back and forth. And when cutting fabric, especially with the strips, I find it easier to use my rotary cutter on my table as opposed to cutting with scissors, vertically at the easel. So that's why I'm cutting this strip with my rotary cutter. And see, I'm doing like a hill with that orange. So I'm going to cover up that area that I didn't have enough green to cover anyway. And if there is a little bit of variation with the layering, like it's not going to be as thick where the orange is, that the green isn't underneath. But the fabric is thin enough that you're not really going to notice. And even if the fabric was a little bit thicker, you wouldn't really notice anyway. Like it would, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it would like, you're going to get a texture kind of look anyway when you're layering fabric. So if you have a little extra texture because of gaps in the fabric, it just lends to the effect. It doesn't make it look weird. It just like enhances what you're doing. So, yeah. I think basically what I'm trying to say is if you only have small pieces of fabric, you can still make it work because everything is going to be layered anyway. Like as long as that's, as long as you're layering stuff, then it doesn't matter if it's completely covered. Okay. Anyway, moving on. So here you can see a better view of my fabric collection, and I'm going through now picking out the green that I want for like the grass layer at the forefront of the picture. And I've decided I want it to be dark. Um, I don't want, I chose to go, or I didn't choose the leaf patterned um, fabric because I didn't want like a clear defined image. I want more of like a texture. So that's why I'm going with this like either this kind of tie-dye or that one with like a smaller print. So it's not overpowering. And I couldn't decide what to do, and I didn't love how bright the orange was, so I'm going to pick the green later, and I'm going in and muting down the orange with some light and dark shades of brown, very thin, watered down, because I don't want to cover up the pattern of the orange. I still like that like dotted pattern. I just want to take down the color a little bit. And now I'm going in because the brown was a little bit messy. I'm fixing up the green just with a little bit of like a neon green paint because that blends in with the green color. And again, this is looking gorgeous on screen, but in person, I'm trying desperately to trust the process because it was not looking good. I didn't realize that it was looking good until I went back and looked at this footage. But in person, yeah, I was struggling. It was hurting. But I'm trusting the process. I'm going in with some black now. Again, just to add like some more shadow and some depth and just trying to make the orange look like what I want it to look like in my head. Yep. Again, I don't know. It's weird. Again, in person, when I was putting the black, there's more like definition. You could see more of the like brush strokes. It was giving more of a texture. That is completely lost in the video footage. This is a weird process. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. I'm going to sit with it for a little bit because you know what? The hubby surprised us with a spontaneous, well, not so spontaneous because he had like a room booked, but we're going to Niagara to look at the solar eclipse. And I'll deal with the painting later. We're in Niagara because it's wine country. I had to get that footage. This is a really cool bridge that goes over the locks. I love that, the lock system. That's how they get like the boats or like the ships, I guess, because they're big. That's how they get them uphill. And there's where we went. One of my, no, I could probably say it is my favorite resort of all time. I absolutely love it here. The Great Wolf Lodge in Niagara. It's so much fun. Instead of a Disney family, we're a Great Wolf Lodge family. We go like every year. Not quite, but just about. Isn't it beautiful? They have it all decked out for spring now. Oh, I love it. It's so pretty. There's the water park. Well, a little bit. I tried not to get like any people, but I still wanted to show it. I love it. It's so much fun. Really tiring though. And I don't know why, but it was really like I felt cold that day after swimming. So I had to, chill out with a nice hot mocha in the room after. Weird angle, but super cozy. And then the next day was Eclipse Day. And I loved that like hanging little motif. So there we are outside. That's the tiny little bit of blue sky. It was really cloudy, but whatever. We did get to see some eclipse. These are hubby's photos. It was really awesome. And it got like noticeably colder and so dark. Isn't that cool? Those are my photos. And I got to see totality. I didn't get a photo of it, but we did get to see it. And then the photos of the eclipse like ending. Those are my photos too. That's like professional version. Something my phone did. I don't know. It was really cool though. And we're back in the studio. Yes, if you've noticed, I am wearing exactly the outfit I wore before our 3-day eclipse adventure. I don't care. As soon as we got back from Niagara, hubby got sick. And yeah, I'm worn out from unpacking and taking care of him. And I need to shower, but I also need to clean the bathroom. But I prefer to shower after I clean the bathroom because cleaning the bathroom I get all gross. And I don't feel like cleaning the bathroom right now. So I'm just wearing the clothes I wore before. And also, I'm starting this project all over again because I hate it. So I ripped off all the old fabric and I'm doing it again. Yeah, this time I've decided to go with just a blue, um, just a fabric with like shades of blue. No white, no off-white, no yellow, just blue. The stars are more subtle and I like it better. It's also a bigger piece of fabric. Originally, I didn't have the edges nicely finished, and I thought that's no big deal. I can just find like a frame at the thrift store and frame the piece, and then it'll be good. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to find a frame that fits this canvas. So I like the idea of having finished edges instead, because if I can't find a frame, then it'll still look gorgeous hanging on the wall. So this piece of fabric is bigger and it will have the nice edges, and yeah. Sometimes a project will go south and you can, work through it and make something of it. And sometimes you have to know when to quit. Quitting does not mean failure, because I don't think there was any coming back from what I was originally making. It was just awful and I hated it. I think this is going to be better. So that's what we're doing. And again, a lot of Mod Podge was used to get everything to secure. The first layer of rolling hills and the second layer of rolling hills. When I found this soft, warm yellow gingham in my scrap stash, I decided that yellow was, in fact, the way to go for the furthest hills. And I just painted some lines. I didn't want to cover up the gingham, but I did want to give it that like freshly harvested farm field look. So I painted some lines on there with just like a gold yellow colored paint. And then to go with that like natural warm brown, I found scraps of this brown leaf pattern, which I put on backwards. So it's, again, a little muted. It's the wrong side of the fabric. And I have to put lines on this one because it needs to cover up the pen markings from a previous pattern that I had drawn on. After deciding on the large brown leaf pattern for that in between hill layer, it was really easy for me to decide which grass I wanted, because the large print, it was just too much large on large. This smaller pattern, I think, fit a lot nicer against the large leaf. Sometimes you want things to be very similar and cohesive, and sometimes you need a little bit of contrast. And the contrast of the big print and the small print, in this case, I thought was just perfect. So that's why I chose this particular green for the grass layer. And again, I loved that it was a nice large piece, so I could get a strip that would adequately cover the sides and the bottom, so I could wrap around and have nice clean edges for the sides and the bottom. I didn't have that with the leaf print because I only had smaller scraps. I ended up deciding to make sure I could cover the sides and make those look nice and clean and neat, and have a little bit of a gap in the center. That's okay, the gap's going to be covered. So that's why I have that gap. And then this white that you can see coming up through the green, I wanted to mention that sometimes the glue or the Mod Podge or whatever you're using, whether it's because it's a thick layer of glue or a thin fabric, sometimes the glue will come up through the fabric. And in that case, you just want to scratch it away like I'm doing now, or like rub it into the fabric like I did earlier, just to sort of make sure that you don't have any thick clumps of glue. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that anywhere that there's a clump of glue, the fabric can dry a little bit darker than the rest of the fabric. And if that's not what you want, then you're going to want to make sure to smooth out and get an even layer of everything so that you don't have any of those clumps. If you don't care about any of the darkening, you can incorporate that into your design and it can look really, really pretty. Or you might not even notice it depending on the pattern and the color of the fabric that you're using. Also, when you manipulate it with your fingers, though, be aware it's very messy and glue gets everywhere. Off camera, I went ahead and started in on my autumn trees. I cut strips out of a brown fabric that kind of has a wood print to it for the trunks of the trees. And then for the foliage, I went with the orange fabric that I was originally going to use for the hills, as well as like the red floral part of a poinsettia print. Against the dotted pattern of the orange fabric, I felt like the red fabric was just too, it was too big, it was too boring. So that's why I went ahead and put little dots of a Christmas red and neon red, just to, break it up, give it a little bit of its own pattern, make it look a little bit more like leaves. And now I'm cutting out what are going to be evergreens. And I used my pinking shears to cut out the fabric for both sets of trees. I find that the jaggedy edge of the pinking shears automatically lends a leaf-like appearance to the fabric that I use for trees. And I'm using, for the evergreens, I have this fabric that it looks like a close-up of a Christmas tree. So it's got like the green tree pattern on the background, and then there's stars and ribbons. And I'm just trying to strategically cut around the stars and ribbons so I just have the green, which is a little bit tedious and awkward, but I make it work. Part of the reason, or part of how I made it work, is instead of cutting one big shape to be multiple trees, like with the leaves, I just cut big blobs and they sort of represent multiple trees. For the green, because I had such a small amount to work with, I ended up cutting 3 separate pieces to be the 3 trees. Then I just glue it with Mod Podge like I've been doing all along with the fabric, and I layer the pieces sort of on top of each other. Again, to make it look like it's a bigger piece because I had to work with such small pieces, and also to give it some depth. So there's the first piece. And now that the other 2 are on, I went in with a little bit of paint and used some neon green to sort of push the furthest tree back. And then I went in with a deep green on the closest tree to bring it forward, again, to give some dimension to the trees and make it look like there are 3. This is something I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I really want to try it. I have one of these foam pumpkins left over from my dollhouse transformation from like 2 years ago. And I really want to use it on this fabric painting. But I only have one, so I've got to get creative. I'm starting by cutting it in half because that would make it easier to glue onto the fabric painting if I have a nice flat surface. And because it's got the plastic coating around the foam, I'm being very careful to kind of saw it because I don't want to shred the plastic and I don't want to cut my fingers. So very, very careful. It is a little bit like cutting a tomato, oddly enough. Okay, so now I've got 1/2 and I'm going to leave that as 1/2. But I want to try and get more than 2 pumpkins. So I'm cutting one of the halves into smaller halves. And then I'm sort of cutting the middle like you'd cut the core out of an apple. Again, so I can have a flat surface rather than that like triangular peak. Once all that's done, I'm hot gluing it to the fabric just because I don't know if tacky glue will be strong enough to hold the foam and the fabric together. I don't know if Mod Podge would be strong enough either. So, hi Hazel in the background. You can kind of see her there. Anyway, I think the hot glue is going to be the best option. Also, I use the hot glue to sort of fill out the sides of the pumpkin so that they look more like these little pieces look more like a pumpkin as opposed to just like weird scraps of plastic covered foam. To make this crescent moon, I used the bottom of a paint tube to draw a circle and then a smaller circle that I offset to make the crescent part. And I cut that out of, it's a really pretty like pale yellow fabric with stars and sparkles on it. Not that that matters, because while I was waiting for the hot glue gun to heat up so I could glue my pumpkins, I decided to use some iridescent sparkle and silver sparkle paints to give like a glittery glow to the crescent moon. And I, painted on top of the moon to give it a little bit of sparkle, but also just a little bit around the outside to sort of line it in a sparkly glow. When all my pumpkins were glued to the little pumpkin patch and all the glue had set, I first painted all the hot glue with white paint because I figured it would be easier to cover the white paint than the clear glue. And I was right. It only took 2 coats of this orange paint to cover up the glue that I had used to fill out the pumpkins and make the little like shard pieces look more like actual pumpkins instead of just like scrap garbage trash. Anyway, I just painted all the white to make it orange and then blended that in with the original orange of the pumpkin just so it didn't look like it had been painted. I wanted it to look like it sort of organically belonged there. And now, I probably should have done this before I glued on the pumpkins, but oh well, that's whatever. I just hung the pumpkins off the edge of the table so I could lay this part flat on the table. And I am now cutting a house-shaped hole in the back of the canvas. As you can see, I have already made an outline of the house that I would like to incorporate into this painting. I outlined it with Sharpie, and I'm just following over those Sharpie lines with my craft knife. This was surprisingly fun and easier than I thought it would be. Although after I made the cuts on the back, I ended up having to lift up the painting and saw through because with all the different layers of fabric, it was difficult to cut through everything. I think it was because I had so meticulously secured everything with the Mod Podge earlier that it was just like it had all fused a bit together and basically become like one piece. And there we go. Ah, beautiful destruction. I love it. There is a point though. There is a point. And if you haven't guessed already, it's coming up. The point is to put something in there. Do you recognize what it is yet? Do you? Do you? Because I'm very excited about it. This was the whole point of the project. Before I can do the reveal, though, I have to secure the house in its new home. So I used copious amounts of hot glue to secure the house to the canvas frame. And that silicone finger cover, oh, that came in clutch. It was a godsend. I don't know how you want to phrase it, but it was very important to help me smooth out the hot glue and make sure everything was joined and not burn my little fingy. And now we're going to head to the final reveal and you can see what this whole madness was about.
It's finished. And I love it. And I don't think you're ready for it. But I'm going to show you anyway. Ah, there it is. I love this piece. It's so awesome. And this is exactly what I wanted to do. This is the whole reason that I made this little house. My original inspiration, which is this. It's a kit that I found on a miniature site. I mean, you can see it's a very simplistic like house on a seasonal background. And there were 4 for all 4 seasons, summer, spring, winter, fall. And I liked it, but I didn't love it. I wanted more. For the amount that the kit would cost, I wanted more in the picture. So that's why I made this. Because it has more. And I love it. But this is exactly why I did what I did. Because in that inspiration image, I really liked how the house looked. It had the 2 floors with a cozy sitting area and a bedroom, and how like the 3D miniature was on top of, it was at like a wood block with wood block background details. And I decided that sticking the frame into the canvas would make it much more secure than just gluing it on top. I think this will be a much more long-lasting decision. This whole idea started like 2 months ago when I first saw that image. And I've just been waiting to finish the house to start the canvas. I didn't know it took me a really long time to figure out what season I was going to do. I really liked all the ideas. And it really came down to the look of the house and what season that would fit into the best. And I really like autumn. I think the orange and that aqua just fits the autumn theme beautifully. So there are a few details that I did not film that I added to the picture. After I put the pumpkins, then I decided that the pumpkin patch looked a little bare. So I put yarn. I just glued some yarn, twisted it around, made sure to attach it at various points to all the pumpkins. And then I cut out some leaves. This is from one of the leaf fabrics that I decided not to use down here. But I cut out the individual leaves and glued a few of them around. Well, one of the features that I had to have, whichever season I ended up deciding on, was the chimney, especially since I have a fireplace in there. The chimney is a scrap of wood that I wrapped in this tan felt, and then I drew the bricks on with Sharpie and glued that down. The smoke is some cotton stuffing that I first glued down and then used some thinned out gray paint to just add a little bit of color, because just the white you wouldn't really see it. And also I wanted it to have like a smoky, I didn't want it to be too dirty, but I wanted to have like a smoky look. And I'm just so happy that I started over again, because I think this background, this looks infinitely better than the other one. It's gorgeous on screen. It's gorgeous in person. I am so happy with it. I might, though, just a little note, I might have to put something back here to weigh down this corner so that it's a little bit more balanced. I haven't tried to hang it on a wall yet, so I don't know if it's going to pull towards the house, because all the weight's in this corner. So I might have to put, I don't know, like a rock or a block of wood or something here to balance it out. But for now, I am super happy with how this turned out, and I am so excited to have a new way to store a miniature. Now I don't have to figure out where to put this. I don't have to find shelf space or rearrange things or pack something away. I can just hang this on a wall and continue to make more miniatures. Well, that is it for me this week, lovelies. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you were maybe entertained, possibly inspired, and I hope that you will come back and continue to join me on my creative journey in my next video. Until then, stay fabulous, stay safe, and know that you're loved. Bye!